So today we're going to be talking about the 5 perceptions of sound in regard to audio for video projects. These are the really important sort of subjective aspects that you really need to be considering as you're compiling all the sounds for your various sound design sequences. We're going to go through some examples of each one of these that are, examples from famous films. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that, and we'll, do some critical examination of these perceptions. And as a result of doing, this by watching examples, I highly recommend making sure that you're using headphones or nice speakers, not just the audio that's coming from a laptop or something like that. So definitely recommend headphones for this one. All right, so let's get started. The 5 perceptions of sound. What are those exactly? I'm talking about loudness, the volume levels, the dynamic range of the material that's presented to us. The directionality of a sound. Are they coming from the left or the right? Are they matching some sort of visual action on screen? Is it something that's happening off of screen? Those types of things. Proximity. How far away are we from the sound? And is that realistic or is that subjective? And those sort of lend themselves into these others. A depth of a sound. Does the sound itself sound realistically what that sound might be, or is it larger than life? Does it sound particularly far away, even though visually it's close up? And then special effects that affect the color of the sound. Something that makes, for some reason, this sound sounds like it's underwater, or after an explosion in a war sequence, how sometimes you get the ringing sound for the characters and things sound more distant. There's a color associated with those. So there's some overlap with a few of these perceptions of sound, but hopefully with some examples, we'll be able to sort of see a little bit of a difference between those things. So let's go into each one of these, take a little bit of a closer look at each one, and look at probably about 2 examples for each one. So when we talk about loudness, I'm talking about how loud are the sounds that we're actually hearing. And is there a certain medium that determines how loud those sounds might be? How wide is the dynamic range? You notice this in particular with theatrical releases, is that the loud sounds are really loud and the quiets are really quiet, because you're, in a theatrical experience, not only do you have a nice sound system that you're working with, but you're in this controlled environment in a theater, and even though there's other people around, the collective experience there is all about the film. There's nothing else to distract you from it. You're not watching something at home and there's all these other things happening, so you're able to have a wider dynamic range with those things. So generally speaking, films have more dynamic range than TV, although we are getting to the point now where, beginning with streaming services starting to have their own original content a few years back, now we're having more and more of these theatrical type releases that are coming straight into our living rooms. And the technology and the cost of fancier home sound systems have decreased, so we're better able and equipped to have more dynamic range in the house. But let's take an example. This is from a recent horror movie called The Babadook, and it's a little bit scary, but it certainly shows us exactly the effectiveness of loudness and dynamic range. So to set this up a little bit, The Babadook is a horror film made in Australia that is essentially about a single mother who's struggling raising a young boy, and they find a children's book with a scary monster in it, and then it sort of starts to overtake her life. So this is a little bit of a bizarre sequence of that scary images from the book sort of coming to good moments there. The dynamic range got almost the quietest of quiet moments to begin with, where all you can hear is the footsteps and almost like the cloth rustling as she's embracing, what appears to be her dead husband, and then going so much further and making things so much louder for those jump scares and things. And it's very effective in creating that sense of dread. So we're using all of these different perceptions of sound as like a toolbox, as tools for us to manipulate our audience and their emotions and how they feel. All right, the next example is kind of has a bleed over and is a good example of proximity as well. But this is a scene from a recent war movie called Dunkirk, a Christopher Nolan movie, and all these movies you should definitely be watching. But this is a scene that really starts to a great example of dynamic range and loudness used for effectiveness in this war scene. So let's take a look. So a pretty terrifyingly realistic, interpretation of what this situation might be like, and really going through and showing you the quiet leading up to the attack and just how intense that brief moment is, especially as those the missiles being dropped approach closer and closer. So very dramatic as a result of this, this build-up, and volume is used as a tool to make us feel a certain way here. Okay, moving on. Directionality is so important, and we've got this image here of this very fancy post-production studio with speakers all along the ceiling and all along the sides. That's because technology has updated a lot in recent years, so we have much more than even just surround sound. So what we have to think of now is, based on what I'm seeing, where are the sounds coming from? Are they on the screen at all, and am I hearing them based on the location of what's on screen, or are they completely off screen and something additional that I'm just hearing from a specific location? Are the sounds actually moving? Do they cross the screen with some sort of action, or a character walking from right to left? Are the sounds following them? And then how can we utilize this new technology such as Dolby Atmos? And if you've never experienced this, it's a pretty incredible technology where there's a series of speakers in the floor and on the ceiling. So it sounds like instead of just surround sound where there's 5.1 speakers, we're talking speakers that just engulf you completely. And we'll look at an example of those things happening. So first up as examples for this is, just see what I've got here. This is a opening scene from a recent movie called Baby Driver. And we've got a lot of different directionality stuff happening just with the soundtrack, with the song that's associated with the scene, because music plays a pivotal role in this. And this is an example of interesting directionality in regards to the way the music was mixed. But in addition to that, you're going to be able to, if you think and watch critically, you're going to start noticing the sounds during this car chase and different things happening in your left and right ears that match the visual action on here, or maybe even things that you don't necessarily see on the screen that you can hear on a specific side, left to right. So let's take a look at this opening scene from Baby Driver.
baby. To kick it home. New York City. The explosion.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, I got to tell you about the fabulous, most groovy bell bottoms. Bell bottoms.
Such a badass opening scene. So some great examples of directionality in there. And the next one that I wanted to show you here, this is from an Academy Award-winning Best Picture film of 2013, I believe it was. It's called Gravity, and it's got George Clooney and Sandra Bullock. And essentially, people are lost doing a spacewalk in space when, you know, some things go terribly wrong while they're trying to make some adjustments to a piece of equipment in outer space. This is one of those films that took full advantage of the Dolby Atmos technology, so it's supposed to sound like sounds are coming from all around you. So again, you got to make sure that you're wearing headphones for this. But this is a continuous shot. It's one of those things where there's no cuts in the camera action, and there's people floating all around, and the camera's moving in all sorts of different ways. So a really great example of directionality in film, and it's just such a fun film to watch too. So here's a scene from Gravity.
Houston, I have a bad feeling about this mission.
Please elaborate.
That's the same feeling I had about Mardi Gras 1987.
That is affirmative. Surprisingly, Control hasn't heard the Mardi Gras story. Please proceed.
Well, it's day one, and I'm bumping my way down Bourbon Street looking for a sister of a friend of mine. The streets are full of people. I'm thinking there's no way I'm going to find this girl.
Proceeding to override?
Then all of a sudden, I look up, and there she is, and I'm about to yell at her. And I see she's holding hands with some short, hairy guy in board shorts and a Margaritaville shirt. And then I realize that this guy is not a guy. That my girl is holding hands with
ISS, this is Houston. Explorer, this is Houston.
Go ahead, Houston.
Mission abort. Repeat. Mission abort. Initiate emergency disconnect from Hubble. Begin re-entry procedure. ISS, initiate emergency evacuation.
Copy all, Houston, and in work. Matt, immediate return to Explorer. Repeat, immediate return to Explorer.
Copy. Explorer, prep airlock.
Airlock engaged, ready to receive.
Houston, elaborate.
Debris from the missile strike has caused a chain reaction, hitting other satellites and creating new debris. Traveling faster than a high-speed bullet up towards your altitude. Now copy.
Copy all. Put a bow on it, Dr. Stone.
I can't. The board is still initializing.
I'm not going to ask you again.
1 second.
Not 1 second, now. Shut it down. That's an order.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm done. Kowalski, initiate emergency disconnect from the Hubble.
All right, Sharif, let's do this.
Roger, Matt.
Houston, update?
Well, we have a full-on chain reaction. It's been confirmed that it's the unintentional side effect of the Russians striking one of their own satellites.
They shut down their own satellite.
Right at disposal. Most likely a spy sat gone bad. Now it's shrapnel. Explorer ready to disengage HST.
Locks releasing in 3, 2, 1.
Explorer, new data coming through.
What's the blowback, Houston?
It's not good. Most of our systems are gone. Debris chain reaction is out of control and rapidly expanding. Multiple satellites are down and they keep on falling.
Define multiple satellites.
Most of them are gone. Telecommunication systems are dead. Expect a communications blackout at any moment.
Kowalski, visual of debris at 9 o'clock.
Half of North America just lost their Facebook.
Explorer, repeat. Expect a communications blackout at any moment.
Copy that, Houston.
Explorer, this is Kowalski confirming visual contact with debris. Debris is from a BSC sat. Repeat, I am...
Dr. Stone requesting faster transport.
We have to go, go!
Kennedy reports meteorological conditions. Go.
Houston, Explorer, copy. Explorer, Dr. Stone requesting faster transport to Bay Area. Explorer, do you copy?
Explorer, permission to retrieve Dr. Stone.
Your go for it. Houston, Explorer, copy.
All right.
We've lost Houston.
Oh,
We've lost Houston.
unstrap. Look, we need to get the hell out of here.
Need some help there, man?
No, don't wait for us.
It's stuck!
Man down!
Houston, this
Man
is
down!
Explorer, copy. Houston, this is Explorer, copy. Kowalski, protect...
Explorer's been hit. Explorer, Explorer, go for the war. Astronaut is off structure. Dr. Stone is off structure. Dr. Stone, detach. You must detach. If you don't detach, that arm's going to carry you too far. Listen to my voice. You need to focus. I'm losing visual of you. In a few seconds, I won't be able to drag you. You need to detach. I can't see you anymore. Do it now. Houston, I've lost visual of Dr. Stone. Houston, I've lost visual of Dr. Stone.
Oh man, that is an intense scene, but an amazing example of directionality with all this audio content. Things swooping all around you, different voices being heard at different locations, and moving with this action. So just an incredible example of how effective that really can be. All right, moving on with proximity. How close am I from a sound? Is it right up next to me? Is it far away? Am I hearing things realistically, or am I changing perspectives from one thing to another? Am I hearing things from one person's perspective and then also hearing them from a different person's perspective within the same sequence? So those that proximity and those audio levels have to change as a result. Am I really hearing what I think I should be hearing, or are things being exaggerated? The example that I've got for you here, this is widely considered the greatest cinematic car chase in Hollywood history. So it's from a 60s movie called Bullet, and it's definitely a little bit dated, but still, because of the lack of CGI and all those types of things and the sound editing for the time, this is still considered to be the greatest car chase ever filmed. What I really want you to pay attention to are the way the sounds fluctuate based on your perceived proximity to the sound, and do those things, how does the sound change as we get closer to the source and those types of things. So this is right at the beginning of the intense part of the car chase from Bullet. One of the things that I really wanted to point out in this particular sequence is just how important this proximity is. You know, we're hearing things as they turn corners, as the cars get closer to, you know, our view, our audience perspective. The sounds grow louder and then they fade away as the car is driving away. But I did want to make sure that that I showed you a particular moment of this. Happens a little bit later on as they're coming down this hill. This is an example of a decision that a sound designer made not to change the perspective as the cars get a little bit closer and further away. So the cars get closer to the camera and they start to sound louder, but then they stay at that same level and the camera zooms out, so they actually appear further away, but the audio level stays the same. So let's watch that. So I would argue that that decision was made because the sound effects it's getting more and more intense. They're super important at that time as they turn the corner, but it sort of contradicts everything else that this scene has been doing up until that point. So it just shows you how the sound designer has to, you know, make some critical decisions about how to approach these sorts of things. The next example that I've got for you is from a movie called The Hurt Locker. It's a Middle East war movie. We've got American troops that are on a rooftop trying to figure out this sort of situation, and then a single American troop that's on the street level dealing with sort of disassembling a car bomb, and there's some sketchy things happening around them. What's important here is not only the proximity of the sounds, but how the sound changes based on whose perspective we're taking on at any one moment. So let's take a look.
What's up with James? He's not answering me.
Yeah, I think he removed his headset.
Will you tell him to put his radio back on, please?
Hey, James! Sergeant Sanborn is asking if you'll please put your headset back on. That's a negative.
That's not gonna happen.
I got eyes on 3 guys at the minaret at 6 o'clock.
The hell is he doing?
I don't know what the fuck he's doing. Looks like he's checking the oil. They're communicating with your cameraman.
This is real bad, man.
Get behind the Jersey barrier.
I can't see James from here.
Get down now!
We can go!
Bastard.
We're done.
Sanborn!
Let's get out of here.
So a real nice example of perspective and proximity. How did things change in regards to audio based on whose point of view we're taking on at the moment? All right, the next element of the perception of sound is depth. What is the perceived closeness of a sound, and how is it rooted in reality or not? Usually not, because otherwise we'd be dealing with proximity. So I've got a great, really quick couple of examples. One from Lord of the Rings, when we first sort of get a glimpse of the Ring of Power or whatever. So let's take a look and just think, does this ring sound like it's even closer or larger than life, or does it sound like what a ring would sound like?
It's still in your pocket.
Yes.
All right, real quick one, I know, but I would argue that this is a good example of depth and shows us that, well, not every object or sound that we hear is going to sound exactly like what we would assume it would sound like. All right, so this sounds like it's even closer to us, even though it's a close-up shot. It sounds like it's even closer, that it carries more weight than it normally does in the way that it drops on the floor, and the resounding, the resulting sounds of it hitting the floor are much bigger than we would necessarily anticipate. And here's sort of a different example, again from the Hurt Locker. And this is just a bullet casing hitting the ground, but check out the depth that we get from this. All right, so some different things happening there. One, because of the slow motion, but also the surreal nature of that. It sounds like that sound is very distant, even though we get this close-up shot of it. We wouldn't hear something like that unless one, it was in slow motion potentially like that, but also if it wasn't like in a big open space with a lot of reverberations in the room. So that's an example of depth. All right, moving on to the last perception of sound is color. Is the sound big or small? Is it fast or slow? Does it change over time? Is it supporting some sort of dream sequence or slow motion effect? Here's a battle scene from the movie 300. And this movie is notorious for its use of slow motion. And the color that is given to the sound is much different than what would really be heard if this was maybe played back in real time instead of slow motion. So it definitely has its own special sort of flavor to it. This one is pretty gory, so if that's not your thing, maybe just listen to the sounds. But here's the scene from 300. All right, so that scene obviously has some unique colors of its own that don't necessarily represent reality, but are there to support this dramatic idea of this slow motion and how powerful these guys have been in here. Okay, this next example of color comes from a movie that was released in the year 2000. It's called Requiem for a Dream. It's another rather intense sort of movie. This particular sequence is about an elderly lady who is becoming increasingly disoriented because of medication that she's on. So she's going back to the doctor to try to receive some information or just to express her concerns over how she's feeling. But she's very disoriented, and things are, as a result of the medication that she's on, things are slowing down and speeding up. There's all sorts of confusion, and it's interesting to hear, especially how the color associated with the sound sort of evolves with this one. Let's take a look.
What seems to be the problem? The weight's doing fine.
The weight's fine. I'm not. The refrigerator.
Is something wrong?
everything's all mixed up, confused.
That's nothing to worry about. Just get this filled. Make an appointment for a week.
All right. Pretty disturbing little scene, and the rest of the movie is even more disturbing at that point, although very well done. But an interesting example, because we get sort of two different colors, right? There's sort of the external characters are sped up and have a different sound as a result, and the main character here, the protagonist, is sort of the exact opposite. Her version is slowed down, and that has its own color, and the mixture of the two is very disorienting, much like the feelings that she's having. All right, so these 5 perceptions of sound are going to, be the basis for, your particular scene. You have to evaluate the scene that you've selected to do this and see how, the idea behind all these perceptions of sound is going to affect the sounds that you gather and how you put together your scene. So thanks for watching this one with me today, guys, and we'll see you next time.